all of you are well. Sorry for the 16 minutes delay in starting the all anticipated part 2 of our nutrition and bench management. I think that many of us joined, if not all of us, last 2 weeks, and it was an eye-opener. And I believe that today we will have the top up and add the icing to the cake. Please kindly mute yourself when you join. Our resource person is ready, and I believe that in a few minutes she will start. Our resource person, as I introduced her last week, is an expert in her own right in the field of nutrition and bench management. She has extensive training in the area, both in Ghana and elsewhere. Until recently, she was in charge of the dietitian in charge of the bench units or bench department of Kolebu Teaching Hospital. She is a dietitian at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, a principal dietitian, soon to be a deputy chief dietitian. She's been practicing for over 14 years, and she works with Operation Smile. She's had both local and external experiences in her practice. So bringing someone or choosing someone to take us through this topic, I think that she has earned her rights or earned the privilege to do that because of her expertise. Ladies and gentlemen,
they're also giving that one out for rent.
Before I introduce the speaker, I would Sylvia Okram.
Not been there.
Sylvia. Yeah, it's okay. So before I introduce I'll introduce her. After that, I will give her a word of prayer. Then she will take up and start. When she's done, we will take up the question and answer session as well. So the speaker is Miss Dede Tekukwayo, a registered dietitian and a principal dietitian with the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Dede, you are welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll give the opening prayer, after which I will stop sharing, then you can share and start with us.
That's fine, thank you. I hope you can hear me very well.
Yes, your voice is clear.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please shall we pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for this evening, for another opportunity to study another important area of our profession, how we can use our expertise to manage bench cases. We pray that your presence will be with us. We grant utterance to our speaker to be able to explain and bring us to understanding. So whenever we have any case, we'll be able to manage it and manage it well. We pray that you'll be with us throughout. Help us have sustained data and help us to be able to join through to the end. In Jesus' name we've prayed. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let me attempt to share my screen. Okay, share. Please, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, it's on now.
Okay, I'm trying to put it in presentation mode. Okay, let me do it another attempt. Okay, please, can you see it in the presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay, a warm good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much, Prince, for the introduction. We had a great time 2 weeks ago, so this is the part 2, the continuation. So this is the overview of what we'll be going through today. Hooray, 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 we'll be having case studies. I'm excited about the cases that we have. So this will be a basis of practice. It will be a free-for-all. We'll do the calculations and then you can unmute yourself. I've left the third component of the question for an interactive segment where you can tell me what you think about the case. So during that time, you can unmute yourself, raise your hand, and then give your opinion on what you think would have been the best way to handle the case. So we're going to talk about key components of a feeding plan, what your feeding plan will entail, and what it should have. If you say you're prescribing a diet plan for a patient with a Burns injury, it has certain things that we have to look out for. And once it's a prescription, those components have to be present. Then I'll touch base on oral feeding. I spoke about it extensively last time, but there are a few top-up points that I'll add concerning our routes of feeding. Would have a brief talk about the enteral feeding as well. And during the enteral feeding bits, I'll talk about the pros and cons for different enteral feeds, be it the commercialized feeds or then the home-based or hospital-based blenderized feeds that we have. Then just touch briefly about the parenteral feeding again. I spoke extensively about it last time. We could still do a bit of recap. And yes, a key point or a key topic for today will be our feeding complications. We have to be aware that in as much as we are excited about our interventions, you have to preempt trouble because in a perfect world, we're expecting everything to go correctly and perfect, but there are a few challenges that can arise when you do your feeding interventions. So let's set the ball rolling. As a way of introduction, from our last presentation, if we don't take anything away at all, you have to know that your patient with a burn injury, especially a major burn injury, and last time we defined that as an injury that is 20% TBSA for an adult, more than 10% TBSA for a child, and if it's full thickness, greater than 5%. So these are what we classify as major burn injuries. So if you are having a patient coming in with 40%, 35, 32, and sometimes the shocker, we've had 70%, we've had 80%, we've had 60%. These are major burn injuries. And with it comes metabolic response from the body and implications. So you should be aware that your patients are amongst the most catabolic and nutritionally vulnerable of all your hospital admissions. So if you have to give extra time for any of your patients, someone with a burn injury will qualify for that. And without nutritional support, we are fighting a losing battle. Even with adequate nutritional support for a patient with burns, you may run into trouble. So it's key to know that without nutritional support is that you might as well say that you're not helping the patient. So we have a very key and major role to play in ensuring that we have a successful outcome for an individual who has a burn injury. And then there are two key words here, adequate and prompt. Adequate and prompt. So what we have to give should be timely and our interventions should be adequate. If you are running a race from here to, let's say, Takrade, and you stop midway, you have made an effort, but it's not going to come out as you want it. So our intervention should be spot on, it should be adequate, and it should be prompt. So I would start with the case studies. As I said, I'm very excited about it. So we're going to have 4 case studies. We would try our hands at it. So I would kindly ask that you get a writing material by you and then something to write with, to calculate with, a sheet of paper or anything, because we'll be doing some calculations. We'll do it together, but it will be good to make an attempt on your own, just for practice as well. It will just be the basics, just trying to calculate the caloric and protein requirements, because the more extensive building of the meal plan, ensuring an adequate nutrition intervention will take a lot more time than we have. So I'm happy that RD Prince covered the topic of translating our calculations to actual interventions. So what we do is I will do the basis, and then planning a menu and all that will take a hint from what RD Prince taught a couple of weeks ago. Okay, so let's go right into it. I have to issue a disclaimer. Ben's care can be traumatic. I know from experience. I've had students collapse on me, vomit, and all other things. But you see, you can't run away from it. You see things you've never seen in your life. You smell things you've never smelled in your life. But the commitment to help the patient comes first. That's what I said last week, that you can't be a professional or a nutritionist or a dietitian who is handling a patient with burns, and you've never seen the patient without the dressing, without the bandages, because the bandages are deceptive. You need to see the patient in a state of undress, where you are seeing the wounds, where you are seeing the pattern of injury, and then you can see the work that you have to put in to make sure that the patient becomes better. So it's not just going to the ward when the patient has all the bandage and then just giving your requirements. You're supposed to actually know what is going on. So I send apologies to those who have had lunch just a few minutes ago or planning on some fufu, but you get over it. So let's go right into it. So the subsequent slides contain very graphic imagery, but we need it for our learning process, so we can't escape it. Okay, so what I'll do is that after I give the case scenario, in our response, we'll come back and break it down. What are the implications of a particular burn? What could have been done better? What do you foresee can be an issue when you are managing that particular type of burn? So I'll use the case studies even as a teaching point to shed more light about specifics. Each pattern of burn has its own unique challenges. And once you hear that, for example, a patient who is going to be has a scald, a hot liquid. If the person was burnt, one person was burnt with lice soup, the other person nkatinkunto, the other person granule soup, and all other things. And even then, katinkunto, it depends on what is inside, mushrooms, kuntomri, and all that. The pattern of injury is not going to be the same, okay, because it's contact, duration, viscosity of the fluid, what poured on the patient. So if you had someone with lice soup being poured on the person compared to granule soup, we're expecting the granule soup to be more serious because it's viscous and will stick to the patient for a longer burn. So this is Madam A, our first case. She's a 28-year-old female. She's a trader. She specializes in spring rolls. So you know how we do spring rolls, deep frying, a lot of oil, and it's commercial. Now she has seizure disorder. The thing with seizures is, I'll come back to it when we discuss it, after we try our hands on it. So yeah, I understand if you have a patient who we heard that had an epileptic fit and has a burn injury, you appreciate that you're going to get a very, very serious burn injury. So there she is. She fell into her oil. She had a seizure during the frying of the spring rolls. And these are real cases, not borrowed. These are people we've seen. And I want to acknowledge R.D. Mariam's input in collating some of the cases as well, getting me examples of cases we can use today. So she was in the oil till the husband found her. So we talk about duration. Now the husband is a driver of commercial vehicle, but it's not his own vehicle. Okay, so this I could add all things, her educational background and everything, but as I said, there's just not enough time for that. So it's just the basis, and we will build on it. You could, after this presentation, take cases you've already handled, and then you can work it up, create all sort of scenarios that you can use. But for today, we'll just keep it very brief. So this is what she has. She has 26% mixed thickness, with a majority of it being full thickness. And so please take note of the percentage burn, and then take note of her weight on admission. Now the pattern of burn, let's spend more time. We have, this is her face. For privacy, we had to blur here, but you can see that there's nasal involvement, her upper lip, and all these things are deep burn. She's the same person here. You don't see the black because we call it debridement, moving away dead skin. So all the time you were seeing her with this black hair, it's just dead skin that will fall off later to reveal the true nature of the burn. So you can see that she has that black spot even on her upper lip. So by the time it's debribed, the burnt skin, which is dead, falls off. You're going to see that she's lost that upper lip. Okay, so she's still the same person here. Okay, so let's go for it. Let's try our hands at this. Let's calculate Madam's A estimated caloric and protein requirements. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we would have an interactive discussion. So I don't have answers to the second one because I want to hear your feedback and see what you think about this case and how you would have gone about it. So we'll consider what factors will be considered based on case information during the assessment and intervention. So I told you who she is, a female, what she does for a living, and what happened to her. So if you're going to do an assessment, last week we learned about the ABC. And I said our assessment takes the normal pattern of our nutritional assessments, where we do anthropometry, we look at the labs, we look at the nutritional-based physical findings, we look at dietary assessments, and we look at environmental economic factors. So that's the same pattern that we'll be having. So your assessment and then your intervention based on the case. So let's go for it. We can use 5 minutes to do it. This is the formula we learned last week. I said it's convenient and it's easy, but if you have a formula that works for you, because there are several, and you think you are more comfortable using that to calculate caloric requirements for a burns patient, that's fine. We can use that. But for today, I would like you to try your hands using the Curie formula. Because as I said, we just need 2 parameters, the body weight and then the percentage burn. So in her case, we can see that she's an adult and her percentage burn is 26%. So kindly note that her weight on admission is 58. So let's go for it. So let's use about 3 minutes, and you can type your answer in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and tell me what you got before we go to the answer. So she's an adult. Last week I said there's an adult formula and then there's the children, and that is even based on the percentage burn. So she has greater than 20%. So we're going to use this. That's 25 times her body weight plus, so you get the calculation for this, you put it down, then you go and look for this in part of your equation as well, 40 times her TBSA, and then subsequently we continue. Okay, have you tried your hands at it? Can I hear a yes, so that I proceed? Please, are you hearing me? Can I hear a yes so that I proceed?
We can hear you.
Okay, can I proceed? Should we use this as a trial? Or someone
Yeah,
has an answer? Okay, we'll use the subsequent ones. So this will be the protein requirement. We learned last week that for an adult, we are looking at 1.5 to 2 grams per kg body weight per day. And then for the children, Crowell says depending on the thickness or the depth of the bend, which we also learned last time, you could up the protein requirement for the child all the way to 4 grams. Some people play safe and just leave it at 2 grams per kg per day because you don't want to have a renal overload, especially for children. But we would have a look at it based on what Crowell says for today. So I'll put this here. I'll keep referring back to it whilst we try our hands at the other cases. So let's use this as a trial case. So I hope you got around 2,500, because if we put the 25 times her body weight here, and then the 40 times the 26, we get this 1,450, and for the 40 times 26, we get 1,040. But if you got something different, you can unmute yourself and we can look at how you went about it. We chose 2 kg per day, 2 grams, 2 grams of protein per kg per day. And she weighs around 58. So we are at 116 grams per day. Friends, there are some comments in the chat box. Please look at it and then you can tell me what they are, whilst I go to the considerations. So let's see what will stand out for you. So as I said, I'm going to use this as a trial case, and then subsequently you would unmute her for the other 3 cases and let me know your thoughts. Now, so I'll just go for the considerations for this case, and then subsequently you will unmute yourself, as I said, and then you give me your considerations. Now, whenever you have someone with a seizure disorder, also known as a type is epilepsy, they would lie in, when they go off, if it's flame, if it's hot soup, if it's hot oil, the patient is going to lie in there till he or she is discovered. That is the nature of that disease. So I've had a patient lose the arm because I think she was doing banku over this firewood something. She had an epileptic episode. She fell into the flame and her hand was in the flame, the fire, the firewood. And she was there till the whole hand was roasted to the bone. So she had to go. So whenever you hear that there's an epileptic, someone with a seizure disorder has come, the bends are normally full thickness. And here is a case that she's, I said the spring roll deep fried, so it has to be a lot of oil. That accounts for her bad bend. Now, if we look at it, we've seen that her mouth has been compromised. So in assessing and trying to do an intervention for your route of feeding, you are likely to do enteral feeds. Now, the nose is also almost gone. So you will not have anywhere to put your NG2. So this is a consideration. You are not going to write NG2 feeding anywhere in the folder. If not, the doctors and nurses will come and remind you. Sorry, did someone say something? Okay, I can continue. All right, so this patient actually ended up having a PEG tube pass for feeding. So these are some of the considerations. And let's look at her socioeconomic status. Is she a middle class earner, high class earner, low? The husband is working, but since it's not his vehicle, work and pay, it has its implications. So that implication would also come into play if you have to recommend supplements. Whey protein is now 1,000 plus. Is it what you're going to write for her? Or you're going to say, oh, you do a crate of eggs. So those are the considerations I'm talking about. If someone has a different one that he or she wanted to talk about too, you can kindly unmute yourself, talk about it, or you can put it in the chat box. We are going to our second case. So this one, everybody, all hands on deck. We are going to practice it. So our second case, she's a 22-year-old female. She's unemployed. She's an SHS graduate staying with her parents. And she had recently delivered. She actually had a 6-month-old child. So she had acid poured on her by her baby's father, baby daddy. He came to the house or her parents' house. He's not married to her. And attacked her with acid. And while she was breastfeeding their child, so no mercy. So unfortunately, the acid poured on the child as well. But the child couldn't make it and passed on. And the culprit is currently on the run, so he has not been arrested. Okay, so you are seeing the lady here. Now, whenever they say an acid burn, that is not accidental. The person doesn't work in the factory where they use acid. The person has no business having acid or alkaline or a chemical, maybe using it to polish metals in the factory or that. It's mostly an assault. And the person pouring the acid wants to disfigure whoever he or she is pouring it on. So almost always you have facial burns. Almost always. They don't pour it at the back. They face the person, trying to talk to the person and try to pour it on the person's face. So you are most likely always to have someone with acid burns with facial involvement. So our dear lady here, all these white things you are seeing, we call it slough. It's dead skin. So you are not seeing a raw wound because it's still being covered by dead skin. Acid burns are among the terrible burns you can have because what has happened is that everywhere you see a black or white is deeper. By the time the dead skin goes away, you have the whole place. It's picked out because it stays on the skin and it eats into the skin. It doesn't spread around. So her thigh, you can see a dark pattern. This is dead skin, is going to go and her wound goes vertical into the skin. That's how terrible acid burns are. So she actually has a wound. All this thing will go away. You can remove it with a sharp object or sometimes it bleeds. So what the nurses will do is they'll keep softening it with oil after every dressing. Then it's going to get off. So here she is. All this, you can see her breasts are involved, her mouth, all the black patches you see is going to go off. So she has lip involvement as well. Okay. So our case is 23% full thickness burn. And her weight on admission is 60 kg. So please, let's try our hands at it. Let's do the calculation. So she's an adult. Once again, her percentage burn is above 20%. And so let's work at it and let's calculate our protein as well. So just about 2 minutes to get that done. And when you are done, if you wish to share what you had, you could just unmute, tell us what you had for the protein, and tell us for what you had for her calories. Okay. Please, I'm not seeing or hearing anyone, so I hope I'm being heard well.
We are hearing you.
Okay, so let's try our hands
I'm
at it.
co-hosting. I'm co-hosting with Senam, so maybe if you see me overly quiet, you can go ahead.
Okay, Senam, so the ball is in your court as well. Please, anyone can just put it into the chat box.
Sure.
Okay, and let me know what you got. So this is our case. She's 23% TBSA, total body surface area, and her weight on admission is 60. So a minute to round up. What did you get? Can I have one of our participants just telling me what your answer was? Or I should go ahead and go through. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box yet. So let me just, okay, I've seen one. Senam, could you give me what is in the chat box?
Okay, so Ikea said our total calories is equal to 2,420 kilocalories.
Okay.
Yes, another person also wrote the same thing, 2,420 kilocalories.
Okay, and what did we get for the
Most are
protein?
the calorie. Okay, so Salahuddin wrote, he's written 2,420 calories and 120 gram protein.
Okay.
She's they are recording,
So it's this is 101. So this is the basis, but you don't stop here.
Yeah.
You have to formulate a diet plan based on it. Yes. Now, what I'm interested in are the considerations. So for your assessment and intervention, what will strike you? What would you say? What will be some key highlights that you make sure that it's part of your assessment and it's part of your intervention? You can take any. Maybe what you consider for during your assessment or what you consider during your intervention. So could I have just a couple of answers, then we can move on. Senam, kindly help me if anyone has put a consideration in the chat box. Or you can equally unmute yourself and let us know what's on your mind as well. It's interactive. We have 2 more case studies to go. Do we have any consideration in the chat box?
Yes. So
Okay.
Samson says we should look at the patient's economic background.
Yeah. She's unemployed. Yeah, she's on. And if her parents are elderly, it's double trouble. Ben's care is very expensive. So that's key. Thank you, Samson. Okay. Any other consideration?
Okay. Cynthia says the location of the patient, so where the person stays. Salahuddin says the breastfeeding state.
Yeah, wow. Let's clap for. She's a breastfeeding mother. So physiologically, the body is still in the state of that. And she's lost her baby.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, most of acid burn patients are already depressed. You are there sitting somewhere and then someone pours things on you. We hide the mirrors from them, but even people just looking at them, the facial expression, the person knows that something bad has happened. And sometimes they're able to get mirrors to look at their faces. I had one patient always crying. We collected the mirror. She always had a mirror and she have pictures of how she looked like to show to you. Okay, so you are likely to have a very depressed patient who you are talking about caloric interventions, but her mind is not there. So a consideration is liaising with psychosocial support to come and help. and help you take care of your patient. Because once the person is depressed and not listening to you, you go and stand there, give your beautiful plans for the patient, and nothing happens. Okay, thank you for that. She's a breastfeeding mom, she still is. So physiologically, the body still thinks that there's a baby. All right. Thank you so much. And let's
Okay.
take the final consideration, then we move on. Any
Okay.
other comments in the
So
chat? Yes.
someone also asked whether she was doing exclusive or mixed feeding. And also someone is saying that we should look at her route of feeding and expected duration of nutrition support.
That's good. So there's facial involvement. Once there's facial involvement, the mouth and nose may be compromised. So the thing is that even if the injury is not in the mouth, you know, if you had a painful pimple,
Yeah.
just even on your cheek, chewing, you need to use your facial muscles to chew. So if you have a sore, a very deep sore located around your mouth, it's not a matter of it even being in the mouth. Moving the face to chew is going to be painful. So considerations of the routes of feeding. Are you going to do an NG? Are you going to do a peg tube? What are you going to do? And if that doesn't materialize and you want to do oral feeding, is it a way to mash the food, blend it so that she's not forced to use her facial muscles when she's chewing? So that's also a good consideration. Yeah. And we'll assume that she was doing exclusive breastfeeding. We'll assume. It's not in the case study, but it's a good assumption we can make. Okay, thank you so much. Any final consideration, then we move on.
I think
Any other comment?
we've covered.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for your comments, your feedback. So you could still be brainstorming around the cases and thinking around. That's the essence of this practice, just to get the wheels in your mind turning as to how you'd have gone about the particular case. Okay. Now we have our first child here. So he is 1 year, 5 months. He's a male and was playing by a table with hot granule soup. He hit the table and the soup subsequently poured on him. His mother gave good first aid and rushed him to the hospital. When we say good first aid, I'd like someone to put in the chat what will be the good first aid. There's only one good first aid for treating a burns case, aside if it's an electrical burn. Any other burn, or it's a frictional burn. But most of the scalds, there's only a very good way to go about the first aid. Okay, so he hit the table. In fact, a majority of your patients who have cuts or hot liquid burns will be children, for the obvious reason. Poor monitoring. The children are walking around, crawling. They don't know where they are going, running into things, running into bowls of soup, pulling tablecloth with hot porridge on it and all that. So now let's look at what is up with our child. Our child had 60% TBSA mixed thickness burn. So we learned the other time that a serious burn in the child is just greater than 10%. And your child has 60%, 60. Children can easily get high percentage of burn because of their small bodies. So if the hot liquid just pours from head to toe, it's almost about 50. So this is what happened to our child. And weight on admission is 9.5. The mom is a trader. We don't know where the father is, but this is what we have. So let's quickly try our hands at it. We have, it's a kid. So our Curie formula for children, he has 60%. So that's above 20% TBSA. So we are going to use this. So it's 60 times the body weight. You get your value. You go use your constant of 35 and multiply it by the percentage burn the child has. As I said, you can take a shot of this so that it will be readily available. It's a full thickness burn, So in terms of protein requirement, we can peg it at either 2.5 or 3. Mixed thickness, then we can make it a partial thickness. Mixed thickness means that you have places of different depths. Some may be superficial, some may be full thickness. But when it comes to hot, thick, viscous fluids, you are likely not to have superficial, but it's possible. Because sometimes by the time let's say porridge poured from the child's shoulder, as it's going down the legs, it's cooling. So by the time the last bit will get to the legs, it's not as hot as the shoulder. So you are likely not to have maybe a full thickness bend on the leg as you have for the shoulder. So sometimes that's what happens. So mixed thickness means that the child had some places it wasn't so thick and all that. But we can still just, to play it safe, peg it at either 2 or 2.5 or still up it to
Hello
3.
there.
Okay.
Hello.
All right, yes.
Hello.
Prince,
Yeah.
please, you can hear me well, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes,
Okay, someone was saying hello, so I thought, okay, sorry about that. Okay, so let's try our hand test. This is our first child. We have one more case, then we'll go into our presentation. Okay, so let's work at it. If you have your answer, you can put it in the chat. Okay? Are we good to go?
So we have our answer.
Okay.
Equiasa Watapon Roads total calories equals 2,670 kilocalories.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And protein, did she calculate for protein?
No.
Okay. So here I pegged it at 2.5,
Okay.
and then this is what we came with. So you could try it and see what you get as well. Now the considerations. I'm excited about the consideration because taking care of a patient with a burn injury is an investigation. You need to get it right. Other cases, like you can have a patient who is on the ward, you go and the patient is still okay after a week. It's because the patient is actively not losing calories or protein due to an open wound that is leaking protein and calories. So your patient, once you don't get the intervention right, it's going to be so obvious. Labs are going to go low. Your patient is going to look more nourished, and it happens in a space of a week. So it's very important to have considerations, your thought process concerning the case. What is this case about? What am I going to do? So that you get your intervention right. Okay, so can we have a few considerations? Senam, kindly help me with what is in the chat. Do we have a few considerations concerning our boy?
Not yet. Okay,
Okay.
so Aisha says the socio-economic status of the mother. Miss Kunkuri says the feeding routes. Venice, tolerable fees based on dentition.
Okay, wow, that's a good point. So age appropriate meals, if we are giving anything or okay, all right, good one there. We can take 2 more considerations, if any, then we move on. It's okay. We don't have any.
Someone is asking if we can pass an NG tube.
Oh, yeah. The advice, even based on what we learned last week, is that for a major burn injury, the calorie is high. If you and feeding children, even without an injury, is complex. They are fussy eaters. Are you now going to stand beside the child while the mother is doing take one and singing a lullaby? You lose your patience like that. So with children, you don't waste time. Even the adults will talk and complain about enteral feeding because you need the child to get consistent nutrition intervention. Children are fussy eaters, and when they are unwell, it's worse. So you can't afford for a child with this high percentage of burn injury to now be fussy about what he or she is eating. And then because of pain, the child will be lying down the whole time without eating. So this child necessarily will need an NG tube passed. Necessarily. Okay. Without any debate, you need to pass an NG tube for this child. Okay. All right. Thank you
We
for
have
your
some,
feedback and answers. Okay, we
yeah.
have a few concerns. We can take two, then I'll move on to the final case.
Okay. Someone is asking whether the baby is still breastfeeding or has been weaned off. And we should have extra support for the mom since the father is not in the picture. And
Good.
someone is asking, Pearl asked, with the SES, can feeding costs be afforded? And then how is it funded?
With what, please?
How is the child's feeding? How will it be funded?
Okay, that's good. So
Looking at
all
the
these things,
socio-economic status of the
women
mother.
status, good, good. But I have a surprise for you. The mother was excellent in providing care for this child. When I say excellent, everything on point. You ask her, she will bring. So, depending on what is happening in your facility, let me use Polygo. Meals, once somebody is on admission, meals are given, breakfast, lunch, and supper. Okay. And then if you have a diet kitchen, you have a customized plan for your child or your patient. Now, of course, it will not suffice. It will not give the child everything he or she needs. So that is when we need the caregiver involvement. So as part of your consideration, if you were considering the mother's socioeconomic status, that is the consideration, because you need to make these decisions and make them really fast. What are you going to require the mother to do that will be comfortable for her? And if it's not comfortable for her, do you have a plan B? Are you going to pass a collection bowl every ward round and collect from the doctors? Are you going to liaise with welfare? Are you going to ask her to go and look for the rich warfer in the village, the uncle, to come and help us? All these things are consideration, and every case is unique. So that is why I said, let's get thinking. So I love the feedback I'm getting. Thank you so much. You could keep thinking about it, how you go about it at your facility, depending on the things that you have available for you or the help that you have available for you. Okay, so we can move on. Now our final case. So this is Mr. D. He's a 48-year-old male. So he's a Chinese national who sustained electrical burns whilst fishing from his fishing pond. How did that happen? If those of us who are familiar with fishing, I'm sure we've seen a fishing rod, if not even in real life, maybe in a movie or in pictures or all that. It has this long metallic thing you throw. Okay, like you flag it into wherever, the river or wherever you are fishing. So that long metallic thing can actually go up. And if you're not conscious of your environment, it can actually connect to a high tension wire. So that's what happened. He wasn't conscious of his environment. So as he was throwing his fishing rod, it connected to an electrical source, a higher voltage electrical source. And we can all see from the picture where it came from. So without even being told about maybe knowing the person, whether he's right-handed or left-handed, you just by looking at the picture, you know that this patient is right-handed because this is the hand that took the blast. And normally people use hands that they are comfortable with. So he was holding the rod in his right hand. Okay, you can see that the left hand has been spared. Okay, Now, in terms of socioeconomic input, he's a manager of his own processing factory with good caregiver support. He's a manager. He has his workers at his disposal. He has a bank account. If he wants to sell the company and take care of himself, he can do it. All right. So this is our final case, an electrical burn injury. And I mentioned last week that electrical burns are terrible, because they can even fry the person from inside. So for privacy, we couldn't get his face and all that, but he became jaundiced. His eyes became jaundiced after a couple of days. There was liver involvement because of the electrical burn, but we won't add that for now. So there we are, 50.5% full thickness burn, and his weight on admission was 70 kg. So let's get to it. You could quickly just try your hands at it. It follows the same pattern of what we had initially. We have mostly adults. So it's an adult, whether male or female, you use the Curie formula for adults to get it. And you can peg his, he has full thickness burn. So you can peg his protein as 2 grams per kg per day using his weight on admission, which was 70 kg. Okay. So I know we are getting a hand of it. So let me just give a minute to someone who says, oh, I've not done any yet. So let me quickly put it in the effort. So just a minute to do it. It follows the same pattern as the others. So it's easy to get. By now, I'm sure you are very comfortable with calculating the calories and then the protein requirement as well. Okay. But Senam, if there's an answer in the chat box, you could let me know.
Sure. There's no answer yet.
Okay. So is it safe to say that
Okay.
we've done it
So
already by then?
we have an answer now.
Okay.
Ikiasewa 3,770 kilocalories.
Okay. Okay, so let's go and see if she was right. Yeah. So Ikia, clapping for you. First person to give me the answer. All right. And you see, you're not just saying Twitter. We know as experts what it means to now formulate a diet plan of 3,770. It's not just getting it. You are supposed to give this patient something like this daily. And so it's a Herculean task. It's a Herculean task. So what would be some considerations? Can we have about 3 or 4 considerations? If any, then we move on. What would be for such a person? What would be your consideration for this case? He's a foreigner. He's well-to-do. Yes. Do we have an answer coming from someone? Senam, please help me with the chat.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dennis says food habits.
Good.
Someone also says
He's likely not to be having your fufu and the abenkwan.
Yeah.
He's a foreigner. He's likely to be having meals that you may not even be familiar with. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. The meals to be involved in the plan since he's a foreigner. We should consider allergies.
Excellent. Any other consideration? I saw someone's hand up, or it's come down.
I think it's gone down. Okay, it's up again.
Unique.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
So you want to find whether the lips or the nostrils are compromised to choose a feeding route.
Good. Thank you. Because I didn't state where his bends were. He could have facial bends as well. Normally, for some people, when the electrical current passes through them, their clothes actually catch fire on top. That's how bad it is sometimes. So it's possible that he had flames and then it went up into his face. So thank you. That's a good point as well. Thank you for your input. So we can take one more consideration and then we continue with the presentation. So now do we have someone?
Yeah. High energy supplements alongside other feeding modalities. And then someone is asking also if he has any comorbidities.
Good. So we could assume he could be diabetic, he could be hypertensive,
Yeah.
and then we'll take it from there. And you see, when he sees someone, so we can assume that he's also high socioeconomic status person.
Yeah.
This is when you go with guns blazing. You order your histamine, you order your human albumin, you order your whey protein. And good news, this guy made it. Okay.
Oh.
This guy made it. Yes, this guy made it. So it's the intervention matters to get you a good outcome. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for your contribution. So we can continue with our presentation. So give yourselves a round of applause. I like the considerations that came. It's good for the thinking process. You could take the same cases and try to give different scenarios to practice. Thank you. So moving forward, your key components of a feeding plan. I'm sure we are aware of many of these, but timing, quality, and quantity should reflect in whatever intervention you are doing. Okay, so let's go look at how they reflect on the different routes of feeding. So let's take the oral feeding. Okay, so timing. We mentioned last week that your patient is likely to have poor appetite. Yes, please.
Sorry to cut in, but there's a question, and I think it would be good if we answer that before we go into this.
Okay,
So
please.
RP Andor is asking if there was any consideration for the jaundice state that he went into.
Yeah, there was.
Okay.
You are supposed to consider the fat intake you are giving. Whilst the medical intervention is going on, you also have to, because the liver is compromised. So subsequently, of course, you will have liver. Once it's an electrical burn, you need a full body lab for all the organs. I mentioned that it fries the body from inside. So you need to know the state of the heart, the state, everything. They actually put heart monitors on such people almost 24/7 because strange things can happen to the heart rhythm. So there is consideration. You know what you would do when the liver is compromised? You look at your fat intake, you look at how you can do your diet in a way that you are giving good calories and then moderate fat intake or low fat, depending on how bad things are. But it was resolved. So it wasn't a major injury to it. It was transient. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
But it's expected. You're welcome. It's expected. With electrical burns, expect anything. Unfortunately, we had a case like that. I think some of my students were with me. He was the one talking to us when we went on ward rounds. I mean, joking, happy, laughing. The next day he was gone. Okay, because too much was going. The heart was fried, everything. It was just a matter of time. So you have to be very careful when you get a patient with electrical burns. Anything can happen. Okay. So with the component of happy, thank you, Andy. Yes, for that. It was Ben. Sorry, Ben was the one who asked the question, or Andy?
Ben, I think.
Ben, okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Okay. So you need to sometimes consider small feeding intervals. Sometimes it's unrealistic to think your patient can have 3 major meals and make up for the calories. So oral feeding, you can encourage, every 2 hours, put something into your mouth. Let's go ahead. And overnight feeding is an advantage in Ben's intervention. You get more time. What is overnight feeding? At least doing 2 or 3 feedings before dawn. So if your diet plan ends around 6, at 9, you can let the patient have something. It's dicey because sometimes your patient is sleeping and they are in so much pain, and to sleep is a luxury. So sometimes you don't want to go and wake the patient up. That's why it's strategic to have an enteral feeding. Then now when the patient is sleeping, you elevate the bed and just pump your thing. Then the patient will open their eyes a bit. But oral intake overnight, you have to be strategic. Don't let the nurses go and wake a patient who has difficulty sleeping and finally was able to sleep. And here you are hitting the patient to wake up and do overnight feeding. So you have to be strategic and see what sort of patient you are doing it for. Now we have to work with periods. There are good periods for your patients. When the pain medication kicks in after dressing, the patient is on cloud 9. I mean, no pain, serene, calm. The patient will eat better. So that is when you go and try to encourage a lot of calories than the time when there's pain. So, eat and all that. So you have to work with periods with moderate pain and great appetite. Sometimes your patient just wakes up, I want fufu and rice soup. Things are better, they are feeling better. Then the next day they feel all down, but be alert to the mood of your patient. And then if your patient is nauseous, there are days like that. The patient just can't keep something down. And you know that those days will be very difficult for intervention, especially oral feeding. So you work with periods of good appetite, periods of less pain, no nausea, and try to get the patient to take in as much as possible during that time. Now, in terms of quality, the key word here is fortification. We can't run away from it. You see how the calories we have to contend with. We are talking about 2,000 plus. We are talking about 3,000, getting to 4,000 calories. You have to fortify. Sometimes the volumes are so small, so the only thing left is to be very good at fortification. And last time we learned about the coconut oil, the MCTs, legume powder. You could have your fruits and vegetables mashed into whatever you are giving to give more calories. Granule paste is a game changer. If you use it well, you can increase the calories of your enteral feeds. Or orally, when you're giving the patient, if the patient is taking bread, you can have a spread on it. You can still give the eggs afterwards. So let's look at fortification when we are giving, especially the oral meals. And then the quality of your meal means that it should be digested easily and able to be utilized by your patient. Fried foods don't do too well with digestion, especially for people who are ill and then their GIT tract is compromised. You know, our great-grandparents knew that. So if you are unwell, they won't come and give you palm nut soup. There will be light soup and agidi or kafa or some boiled yam for you to recover. So there's a principle behind it. Okay. Fried foods take a lot of energy, a lot of time to digest and all. You need to help your patient because the GIT tract, as we learned last time, is compromised. And when available, let's use pre-digested supplements. Supplements that already have, for example, amino acid profile. It means that the protein has already been broken down to an item or an ingredient that can easily be absorbed or assimilated. So let's go for it when available. Then the quantity of your meals, in as much as you want your patient to eat. As I said, I think someone should mute themselves. Sorry, there's some feedback. Okay. So in terms of quantity, thank you. In terms of quantity, we have spreading, as I said, if you have a lot to give the patient, but the win-win is having it spread over the whole day. It's better to do small frequent meals spread over the day to accumulate your calories and protein requirements. And then a key word here, comfort food. We all have our comfort food. Maybe you didn't know that that was your comfort food. It's the food that if push comes to shove, that's what you take. The day you are tired, you don't have appetite, at least if they come and put that food in front of you, you'll take it. So as I'm talking, you could think about what your comfort food is. Everybody has it. When the patient is over an admission, you see everybody's comfort food. At some point where they are depressed, they are tired, they will ask for that. It can be fufu and light soup. It can be, and strangely enough, comfort foods may not be nutritious, but please, even for mental health of your patient, allow. Sometimes it's the only thing the person is holding on to. Sometimes it's a childhood food that the person has not eaten in a long time. But in this state, the person is a different person and it goes back to childhood. So comfort foods and favorite foods should be used to improve intake. Now, please, sometimes it's not a time to say that, oh, the person took banku yesterday, is taking it this morning, is taking it. You want the person to try yam. That's not the time. If your banku is balanced and the person wants to eat in morning, afternoon, evening, it's going to help you get your calories. Allow it to go. It falls under the comfort food and favorite foods. And this can easily help you improve the intake. I had a patient who apparently at home, it was a middle-aged man who always, 6 a.m., they pound fufu for him. I thought it was a joke till the caregivers came to testify. He came on the ward and he wanted his fufu every 6 a.m. This person is so used to it. You can't talk about yam, you can't talk about morikuku, you can't. So you try to work with the patient to improve the intake, okay? And then this is a strategy you use. We know that chewing, swallowing, trying to break down food takes energy. So you alternate. If someone had, let's say, rice, chewed it, especially for someone with facial bends, the place is all sore. The next thing you can do is give something that can be drunk or swallowed, something easy, pureed, that doesn't put stress, especially days that are not good for the patient. The patient is in distress and chewing will be an issue, trying to put food in the mouth. You try to do things like shakes, things that are easy to drink, to alternate so that you meet your quantity as well. So let's quickly go through the intraphase. A lot we know, but I'm just bringing your mind to it in the role it plays in your care of bends, patients with bends. Last time I mentioned that if for nothing at all, you want to get items to help your patient who has bends, get a blender. You can start from there. And with it, you can make nutritious stuff for your patients, okay? So we know enteral feeds, we have the commercial or scientifically developed ones, and then the ones you do in the hospital or the house or in your diet kitchen. We know what will happen, would entail our home or kitchen prepared feeds. We are talking about fortified soups, we are talking about porridges, we have cereal blends, we have our custard, we can blend fruits, we can blend vegetables, we can do milky shakes. You could have Vita milk, and then we add a piece of banana in it, if your patient can tolerate it, to fortify it. So there are things that you can do when it comes to their home meals. And then we know about our commercial meals that have the profiles of your lipids and your amino acids and glucose. Now, I just put this here so that whenever you select a particular enteral feed, you should know that with it may come advantages or disadvantages, and you should be alert to look out for these ones. So briefly, sometimes your home prepared meals, you know what you are putting in it. You are formulating it. So you can go slow you won't add artificial flavors, you won't add additives, and then it kind of like looks more natural. And there's a potential to increase your fiber because you are blending some of the things as is. Now, I like this point, reduce instances of gagging or wrenching. Who has opened one of those cans and bottles of the commercial feeds before? Sometimes they have this interesting smell that puts you off. Okay, so you are even a professional and it may smell very funny to you. Imagine your patient who has not done dietetics, who has been having ampesi and this thing morning, that's all the person is eating. grounded contumely, and then you come and give this funny smelling thing that drink, it is going to help you. Sometimes it's really tough. So that's the advantage of formulating things that are from familiar. But we know the disadvantage. You have to blend. And maybe costly, maybe to the patient. If you say, go and bring a crate of eggs, I want to do something. It may be costly. Sometimes we assume that because we are doing it from scratch, it may be cheaper for the patient. Not necessarily. Okay, but it's rare to sometimes have a costly hospital or home prepared meal. Now, you need this. We all know it. We've calculated calories and protein requirements. It doesn't stop there. You need to know your exchanges. You need to know what goes. If you are putting half a banana into Vitamilk, shake and blending it to send it to your patient, of course, you are doing it because you have knowledge of nutritional analysis. You know what you are doing. So someone who is not well versed in that knowledge is likely not to be successful with home or hospital prepared formula. And we see that caregivers making an attempt just to blend something and bring, they'll get it wrong. Okay, so this is one of you want this done, you need to have this information. And then how many times have the nurses come to complain that your feet have blocked the tube? For me, several. No matter what you do, it's not too smooth. Your Diet Cooks can sieve and sieve and sieve and sieve. But the risk of tube obstruction is higher with your home or hospital prepared formula feeds. And then these key things, because it's not done sometimes under a sterile condition, you go to you are blending, there's a fly hovering around, the wind is blowing dust from your mosquito net in the small place you are using. So sometimes you have issues with contamination. And another key one, osmolarity, is challenging. I spoke of using a feeding bag the other time and I was so excited. And I put fortified soup in it. I was called a few hours later by the nurses. When I went, my yam and all its accompanying soldiers were at the bottom of the feeding bag. It has separated from the water. Okay, so it's gravity feeding, sometimes using your blended feeds. It doesn't go too well. So on the flip side, we have the commercial feeds, usually sterile. Companies, high hygienic environments and all that. And another thing, less time consuming. You just hang your bag, it's ready. The nurses, sometimes you tell nurses to put whey protein just when they're about to feed. All these things time consuming to them. And normally you don't have flow problems. It goes very well under gravity. And then the stability, because you normally have additives, etc. It's likely that when you open it, it may stay longer, especially if you have access to a fridge. But our fortified soup and stuff with the egg that they put in, just a few minutes, and then you have multiplication of your microbes. So that's the pros and cons whenever we are selecting. But of course, the disadvantages are, if it's not available, it's not available. We can use it, okay? And then normally cost, they are imported, and then the expenditure to get it is normally high. Now the risks of allergies. So sometimes the components of the commercial feeds come in chemical compositions, phosphate something and all that. You may not know the breakdown of what exactly it is. So you may not even be able to advise your patient accordingly based on the allergic exposure. You may not know what actually had come together. You may read it and you see that this additive is this and all that. So there's always a risk of allergy when you are using the commercial feeds. And then of course, formula intolerance. The patient is not just used to the things that were used to create the formula. So maybe have intolerance to it. Okay. Now quickly, I saw Sarah's hand up, but Sarah, would you wait for me to finish? Then I can take it. The enteral route, we have the bolus feeding and then the continuous feeding. So I'm sure we know, I'm just quickly going because these are also have implications when you are feeding someone with a burn injury. So that's why I'm going quickly over it just to touch base with it. So mostly we do the bolus feeding where you deliver, if it's a 3-hourly feeding, the nurse goes, if they are giving 400 meals, 300 they give and then they go at once. They can use a pump, a syringe, or hold it under gravity. The continuous feeding is just what it means. It's normally through a pump, which has been set to deliver if it's 10 meals every 2 hours, if it's 5 meals every 2. Nobody is involved. The nurses will just come and look to see if the machine is functioning well, and then you set it and go. And then you also come and look and make sure that everything is going well. Then it will just keep delivering the fixed amount of your nutrients to your patients consistently. If it's every 2 hours or every hour, every 30 minutes, maybe 2 meals every 30 minutes or something. Okay. Then again, advantages. So the bolus feeding, when we talk about flexibility, your patient is not connected to a pump. So if physio comes and says that get up and let's go for exercise, it's not now you have to call to disconnect the pump and all that. You just do the syringe in a way and then the person just goes. Okay. And it mimics a normal pattern of eating because you are doing it just like how you would have made the person have oral intake. Now the disadvantage is for the bolus feeding, of course, the flip side. You need to go and call a nurse who is so busy to now come and stand there and try to give a particular amount at a particular time. And unfortunately, in burns care, if you see a patient having difficulty and gastric issues, sometimes the volume of feed is too high at once. So that's the risk with the bolus. Sometimes we do 400 meals at a time. You get a patient who cannot tolerate that. So that is where your continuous feeding would have been an advantage. So you do small volumes that can be tolerated. And then the continuous feeding, the advantage is less labor intensive and allows for overnight feeding. Imagine just setting it up. Then the night nurse will just be checking once in a while, and then that's all. But guess what? Of course, requires some technical ability. The pumps are not just on the market. It goes with pharmaceutical companies. They have to come and teach you how to use the pump. You have to set it up for you with their products. And then sometimes your patient is going to the washroom. You need to organize how you're going to move. So mobility is restricted when the patient is on the pump. And because you are keeping over 24 hours, a tube or a pump, the patient can be sleeping and just turn. You're at risk of something pulling out from somewhere because your patient is sleeping. Some people sleep with all over, hands here, legs there. So you come and then tube displacement, then that may lead to another issue. For parenteral feeding, I put it here just to bring your mind to it that we normally do the partial parenteral. If you get access to total parenteral feeding, it's because the patient, that's the last alternative you have for the patient. The patient has a compromised GIT tract, and the only option is to have the patient on total parenteral feeding. Then we do that. But most of the time, if we are talking about parenteral feeding in burns management, we are talking about the partial parenteral. You saw me kind of rushing it because this is the major thing that we'll look at and then we'll bring the presentation to an end. So feeding complications, you have to preempt it because it's just being safe. Don't let it take you by surprise. So you have to, once your patient is on any feeding plan, you have to be cautious that feeding complications can occur. Some are so deadly that prevention is the name of the game. You don't let it occur, then you correct it. So you do more of preventive than an intervention. So some of the feeding complications we'll come across will be aspiration, refeeding syndrome. I remember R.D. Mavis asking about it last week. Diarrhea is a complication, a feeding complication when you're treating a patient with a burn injury. We take it for granted when your patient sees that he or she is having diarrhea. It's like something normal, but it's actually a complication of feeding as well. Nausea and vomiting, and then we can have abdominal pain or distension. So let's take it one after the other. So I'm sure we are familiar with what aspiration is. If not, is anything else entering the lungs that is not air? So saliva, food, liquids, vomit, going where air should be in the lungs. Then now we would say aspiration. Okay. So it compromises the breathing, compromises oxygen availability, and it can be deadly. So it's one of the things that is preventive. You are not waiting for it to happen because your patient may not recover from it. All right. Now, there are multiple factors. Those who work with stroke patients, you know that they are prone to that because of the weakened muscles after the stroke incident. But this concerns hearts, high gastric residual volume. Now, your patient, when you feed, maybe enteral or oral or whatever, yes, mainly for the enteral and oral, you expect that within a certain period, the food would have moved from the stomach to give more space to move. But for some reason, it doesn't happen all the time like that. And the residual volume, what is left in the stomach, may be very high, such that if you come and add more, it just pushes the food up. So normally the culprit can be high bolus feeding volumes. I had a patient where a child, they didn't look at the recommendation, and someone just went to give what it was on his or her mind. Apparently, the mother had even given some cocoa orally before, so we just had to stop the mother from ever giving oral. And she didn't tell the nurse. She told the nurse the child had not eaten, and the nurse went to pump normal volumes, and the child had just eaten. And you know, with NG feeding, enteral feeds, it's like a force feeding. The child can't say that I'm satisfied. So the nurse thinking that the child had not eaten, not knowing the mom had force fed a whole bowl of porridge, and the child aspirated. So the feeding volumes, bolus all at once when you are pumping, could also now not give the stomach the chance to clear it. So emphasis is normally on rate of feeding and feeding pattern. If it's 2 hourly, 3 hourly. If somebody is at risk of aspirating, you have to know how to space your feeding times. It can't be quickly. Okay, something you can do 4 hours just to make sure that the stomach is clear before the next feed comes. Then you lower your bolus volumes as well. So the emphasis is the feeding pattern and the rate of feeding more than the enteral feed use. So normally when somebody aspirates, the culprit is more the rate of feeding and then the feeding pattern. Not, in most cases, it's not the feed itself. Okay. So this is what I always say when I go and see them, especially on an enteral feed. I tell the nurses, if for nothing at all, the nurses know. But sometimes, you see, the patient is comfortably in one place because the injury is at maybe the back, the patient is comfortable at the side, and the nurses don't want to bother the patient. Please, any patient whose head is not above the stomach, even if you can't gauge what 30 degrees is, head should be above the stomach whenever feeding is being done. Head above the stomach. Once the head of the patient is above the stomach, you are likely to meet the target of your 30 degrees or higher. And you can get the patient to even sit if pain is not an issue. All right. Now the gastric residual volume is according to protocol. In Ghana, we don't measure it. Other places before the next feed for enteral feeding, they will aspirate the stomach contents and try to see what is there before they feed. Our protocol, for what I can remember in some of our books and what we have adopted, is 200 mils. But new guidelines have come out to say that if it's below 500 mils, unless your patient is showing signs of intolerance, don't withhold feeding. It was getting to a point when, as soon as maybe the nursing team see the stomach of the patient just a little, withhold feed, withhold feed, withhold feed. That could also be harmful. So this is for a debate. We can look at it. What will we do? Because we rarely monitor the gastric residual volume. I don't know about your place. Maybe when it's time for discussion, you can let me know what you do. But there's also another thing you can do. This. Whenever there's a presence of food in the patient's mouth, it means that the GNT tract has been compromised. Food is coming up because normally the patient should swallow it. So especially for a patient that is sedated, semi-conscious, thereabout, be careful. Once you see the food you fed somewhere in the mouth, corner of the mouth, and it wasn't oral feeding, it was tube feeding, and the food is now showing up in the mouth, don't go further. Stop, try and see what is happening before the next feeding is done. Okay, thank you. Now, our refeeding syndrome. I know a lot of us know it. For someone who is not familiar, it's as simple as this. You fasted for 1 week, dry, or maybe you were drinking water. Then after the 7th day, you made them do fufu and abenkwan for you to break your fast. Whatever will happen to you after that fufu and abenkwan mimics refeeding syndrome. So this is the layman's description of refeeding syndrome. So, but this one is more serious because it's got to do with electrolytes and fluids. It's going all out. We know that when someone is in a state of starvation, the enzymes are compromised. Even stomachs shrink because it's not getting food. So a lot of things change. And if you suddenly come around and then do a business as usual, the body was not prepared. So there's no backup. Sometimes you have a depletion of the vitamins that should help in digestion and assimilation and all that, because nothing was going on. So it's basically defined as a potential fatal shift in fluids and electrolytes that may occur in malnourished patients on refeeding following a period of starvation. And this is also a very dangerous scenario that you want to avoid. You don't want it to occur, and then you do plan B. Okay. So we have 2 risk assessments you can do for your patient and flag a patient who is at risk of having refeeding syndrome. Because some of your patients with burns could be in a state of starvation before they come. Some, after the burn, they were kept at home for a couple of weeks, doing herbal treatment. The patient was not eating and all that. It can easily be a challenge when a patient comes and then you try to feed. You calculated your 3,000 calories and you are eager to quickly just set things into motion. Okay, so we can do 2 risk assessment. This is one. I'll talk about the second one. This we can get. So this one, the first assessment, you just need one of these indicators, and then your patient is at risk of refeeding syndrome. Just one or more. But if you flag the patient for just one of this, the patient is at risk of refeeding syndrome. So what are these parameters? A BMI of less than 16. The patient is at risk of refeeding syndrome. Then if unintentional weight loss, you are able to get the previous weight and is greater than 15%. So the weight now and what the person had about 3 or 6 months ago, the person has lost about 15% of the previous weight. You also just need that, and then you flag the person. Little or no, so this will be so easy for us to flag. Little or no nutritional intake for greater than 10 days. So it can be part of your assessment. Ask about how the person's eating has gone 10 days prior to the injury. For these ones, you may have to wait low levels of potassium, phosphate, and magnesium. You have to wait for the labs, which may delay. So the ones within our power to quickly do will be your body mass, the unintentional weight loss, if you get a good caregiver who can tell you, or this little or no nutritional intake for greater than 10 days. For assessment 2, that one you need 2 indicators to flag red. Okay, so the other one you just need 1. This one you need at least 2. So the body mass index should be less than 18.5. Okay, so that one you need another indicator. Unintentional weight loss, that is greater than 10%. So you could have this flagging and this hand in hand. Then you flag your patient as being at risk of refeeding syndrome. Or little or no nutritional intake greater than 5 days. And then you have an alcoholic, someone who abuses alcohol or is on hard drugs. You know the interference it has with intake of your nutrients. So you flag the person. Now, as I mentioned, prevention is the name of the game. You can't have your patient having refeeding syndrome before you put in any contingency plan. So just like our first aspiration, you need to prevent it. So here we go. Flag a patient with long-term malnutrition. It's something we can ask during assessment. Number 2 will be challenging because monitor for intolerance at the onset of enteral feedings. Then that means the patient is hooked to a heart monitor and all that. So this may be a challenge, but in a good setting like an ICU, you will have these feedback from the medical staff. And then you tackle vitamin and mineral deficiencies. We mentioned the IVI stimming they give to the patients and all that. But even if you do one, which is within our power to do, flag patients with long-term malnutrition. Even if you don't have access to these other ones, at least we are playing it safe. And then we know how to go about refeeding syndrome. Start slowly. And as much as we want to give 3,000 calories and all that to our patients, it's like warming an engine. So the recommendation is to start at 10 kilocalories per kg per day. And then you increase it within a week, gradually as your patient is tolerating it. And then there should be vitamin supplementation to make sure that your B vitamins are there. And then we mentioned potassium, phosphate, and magnesium being indicators as well. So there could be supplementation for that. But as I said, some things are difficult. This supplementation, so much may be happening. So at least to play it safe whilst you wait for all these ones to be done, you can start gradually with a low caloric intake for the patient. Now, I mentioned that we take diarrhea for granted. but it's also a complication of feeding because we know that it could easily lead to electrolyte imbalance, dehydration, and malnutrition because your patient is go in, come out sort of thing, especially if it's very quick. No chance for absorption of nutrients and all that. But we have to know what type of diarrhea. Okay. I can give an example of when I got a new product. I was so excited. Originally, the product was supposed to be used for continuous feeding, but of course, we didn't have pump and all that. And I said, oh, anything goes. I can customize it to do enteral. What I didn't put into account is the viscosity of that thing. So I went all out and I still lowered the volume and then gave it, a child was on it and then an adult. The next day, both of them had diarrhea. And this one, you know where it's coming from. Okay, it's osmotic. The concentration was too much and kept drawing water into their system. So I just adjusted and they were okay. So this one, you can't blame medication they are taking. You can't blame bacterial contamination. You can't blame other things. So the starting point is to get to know what is going on. So that's why I said that don't be shy to go with the nurses to look at the stool. The nurses will do that job for you. They are good at describing it to you. Greenish, stool, foul smelling, then you know something that there's a microorganism involved. So you can go and talk to your kitchen staff that they should try and ensure food safety when they are doing the thing. Because definitely it's not going to come from anything else but than what you give to the patient if there's a bacterial contamination. Okay. So we have to keep this in mind. And sometimes even fiber that we give, you know, fiber draws water. So maybe the amount you put into the feed didn't go well. And then you have patient diarrhea. So let's kindly have a look at that as well. Now, as I said, the challenge is electrolytes abnormalities. I've mentioned malnutrition and pressure sores. Some of your patients can't walk, so they are wearing diapers because their leg is bent. Most of your patients with lower limb involvement bends are going to have to wear diapers because they are not going to get up and go to the loo. So imagine that patient has diarrhea. There will always be moisture at the back or the bumble. And it doesn't take long and then the skin integrity will be compromised and you'll be having pressure sores left and right. So we have to know. Okay, so now there's something interesting. Once the patient has diarrhea, the first thing we think of is withholding feeds. But this second point is key. You have to know the cause of diarrhea before you are discontinuing, reducing amount of formula and all that. If every time the patient has diarrhea is discontinue feed, your patient will be malnourished. So it's always good to keep following to go and find out what happened and your patient started having diarrhea. I had a patient who, once you added whey protein, diarrhea. So we couldn't give whey protein. We had to look for something else. So we knew that was where it was coming from because it's instant. You add it, the patient takes it, give the patient a couple of minutes. And once we withheld it and found another substitute, the patient did very well. Okay, so the main thing is to find out what is happening before you can get a solution. And if it falls at your doorstep in terms of the feed, something has got to do with the feed, then you can make adjustments to it. Now with the nausea and vomiting, we can let the patient sit upright. It helps. Once again, about 30 to 45 degrees. You can let the nurses help you document the what happens before your patient vomits. So let me give you another scenario. When we fed a patient, immediately, whilst I was standing there, the nurses will mash the medication, that is a tablet form, cool water, and then use it to flush the tube too. So they were combining our feeding with the medication. Anytime they did that, the patient vomited. Anytime. I don't know whether it was the scent of the medication or the cycle. Once we put our foot down there, please do your medication outside as giving the NG tube feeding. The vomiting stopped. So you need to document first frequency, it can be volume, and surrounding events. This is what I'm saying. Sometimes your patient will vomit only after dressing. And then you know that, oh, maybe it's pain related, or the person went to see the wound and then it triggered something. So that one, you know that it's likely to happen only on dressing days. Then you don't bother about it too much. It's got nothing to do with your diet plan. Okay. And the medical history. Is there something that is triggering the vomiting that you have to know? And then we have to look at the feeding regime. Volume, rate, concentration of feed. It may be that you are overfeeding your patient, especially for children, because they have no say. Maybe what you know is that after the child has been given maybe 200 mils, then the child vomits. So the next feed, you can try 100 or 50 and see. If at 100, the child doesn't vomit, then you know that it's got something to do with your volume. So you have to adjust it. So it's very important for us to know what is going on when you get a complication. And then sometimes temperature of the feed, you'd be surprised. If it's warm, for some people, they throw up. So they would like to take things that are cold. Medications that may cause vomiting. I spoke about when the nurses give immediately. And then you have to confirm the position of the feeding tube. Is it well placed? Sometimes the tube is hanging somewhere. It irritates the wrong thing and can elicit vomiting. So all these are things you can probe and then see that it's being done well. Okay. Constipation is also a complication. These are things that sometimes, so your patient is constipated, it's okay and all that. Apparently, it's more frequent than diarrhea, and it's true. If for nothing at all, the long hospital admissions where your patient is not moving doesn't help in ensuring loose stools. Secondly, the medications, opioids, some of them just, the side effects are constipation. So you have to probe and see if the medication the patient is on has that side effect. Then you can talk to the doctors to get an intervention from their end. All right. So, and we can put insoluble fiber, as if it's available, a teaspoon or something into the patient's food or our vegetables, blend it, try to use it, see if the patient is well hydrated and all that. But mostly it's a challenge. But if we can give fruits, we can do all that. But if it's medication based or the genesis is medication, you will need the involvement of the medical team to do an intervention medically. Okay. Now I think this is yes, the last one. Sometimes it's abdominal pain. The patients will complain of severe pain. Last 2 weeks, we learned about Kellen's ulcer. And that one, it's an ulcer that is found in patients who have burn injury because of the attack of the stress hormones on the GIT tract. With that, next year, it's medically sorted out. So the doctors know the symptoms, so they will also probe and give medication for that. But aside that, normally the bowel function is looked at. Is something noted somewhere? Is there an obstruction? They'll check for that. And sometimes it's good, the way we do our syringe when we are doing bolus feeding should try as much as possible to minimize the passage of air into the tube. And then whenever your patient is having abdominal pain or distension, this is the time to look at what you are doing. The feeding regime, Let's include the method. Is it bolus feeding? Is the volume okay? We all know that even for us, when you overeat, you have stomach pain. If it's your favorite food and then maybe jollof, you were so excited, you know you are full and you continue eating, you feel some discomfort and sometimes very severe pain for overeating. It may just be that. Maybe the bolus feeding volumes you are giving to the patient is too high. So that may be, so what we notice that pain only comes after feeding. Then you should have a look again at your volume. And then the rate, even with bolus feeding, it's supposed to be done gradually. But sometimes our nurses are in a hurry, there are many patients, and then you see the pumping it immediately, boom, 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 boom. Just imagine you were lying down, relaxing, and then your stomach is open, and someone just pours it all, food inside all of a sudden. Sometimes the reaction is just the pain coming from that increased rate of bolus feeding. So we can look at that as well. Okay. And then once again, the temperature of the feed. Even you can attest that even for you, sometimes certain temperature of foods don't go too well with your tongue at certain temperature. It happens. So we can also have a look at that as well. So food for thought before I conclude. Enteral feeding is always a scapegoat. If the doctors have changed medication and it's affecting, giving a feeding complication, stop feeding, withhold the enteral feed. It may be the vitamin milk you are given. It is not like that. So you have to stand your ground, do your investigation well, because once you withhold the feed and the patient needs it, you are losing calories. And then it will be a challenge. The challenge will come to your doorstep if the patient doesn't do well nutritionally. So you have to be, it's not just in Ghana, everywhere else I know, once there's a challenge with the stomach, the first thing is whatever you are given becomes a culprit. So let's look at it very well. Now, clinical complications of enteral feeding, including refeeding syndrome. We mentioned it, it's preventive. So how do we prevent it? We are looking at our feeding methods and ensure that it's suited for the patient. We are looking at our rates and then ensuring that our pattern of feeding is also appropriate. So to conclude, nutrition is the name of the game. With it comes selecting your methods of feeding, your routes, your calculations, and all that to individualize your plan for the patient. We have to be aware that there may be feeding complications. Some of it is best to prevent it before it happens. Some may not be on your table, but you should arm yourself with knowledge so that you know what you have to answer to and the one you don't have to answer to. And then we try our best to ensure that our patient gets the best of care. So on that note, I'll say thank you for your time. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dede, for the presentation. I know we have learned a lot, and I would now, I think, go through the chats, read out the questions that are there, and have you answer them. Then afterwards, members who would like to voice out their questions, we would open the floor for them to do so. All right. So for the first question, someone is asking if it is advisable to mix burn patients with other patients, considering the risk of sepsis in these individuals.
So let me answer that. It's a no, and no, and no. But lack of space. In fact, in places, I can use India. Even when we are entering, I don't wear the same clothes. I'm supposed to change. I wish I could have put pictures of my gear. Now, in some places when you are going, they have this one-way air that even blows on you. And it's not anybody. We have only one caregiver at a time to the patient, also dressed in the gear, and a dedicated ward for the patient with burns. Unfortunately, space and all that, we treat the patient with burns like any other person. It's on the ward with people with other conditions, really ulcer. Somebody has this infectious something and it's right by a patient with burns. So that's the situation we find ourselves. But all things being equal, the burns patient is a semi-ICU or fully ICU care patient. You are going there, your hair is tied, I'm wearing my net, I'm wearing my surgical gown, I have something on my feet, or change into, they had these slippers you wear and then enter the ward with it. So they shouldn't be with other patients, but we don't get it like that. So, but in the ideal situation, don't mix them up with other patients.
Great, thank you. All right, so Mr. Mensah wants to know when do we recommend amino acids instead of food sources of protein, and what types of amino acids are most suitable?
They're essential, non-essential, essential, all of them, because they all have a role to play. Yes, but so this is it. Even your protein, your end product will give you your amino acids. Now, in going for your amino acids, you are bypassing that breakdown process and saving your patient time. That is why we are doing our interventions. And it's good to have a pre-digested meal. Okay, I hope I've answered it for him. Your patient is unwell. Digestion, usage of your nutrients, it's not going well. So you want to help your patient by bypassing some processes. So you are going for the end results of your protein, which will now easily be assimilated, and then your patient will still get the benefit of your protein. So it's the ideal setting. Most of the feeds for patients with burns, you see that is the end products of your proteins, the amino acids and all. You rarely get them forcing your patient to take your eggs, your protein and all that. If the patient can eat orally, fine. But once they are doing enteral feeding, most of it is a pre-digested form where you have a pre-digested version of what you wanted to give to the patient for easy absorption. I hope you get it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So the next question, can you please explain the unavailability of patients that was stated as part of the disadvantages of blenderized feed?
Did I state unavailable? Let me go there. Maybe it was stated in, let me quickly just go there. And then let me minimize this. Okay. My references, okay. Pardon me, let me just say that word. For blenderized. Blenderized.
Yes, please, blenderized. The disadvantages.
So it's maybe unavailable inpatient. So for example, so it's not for the patient may be unavailable. So it's not every hospital that will have a diet kitchen. It's not every hospital that would have the ability to blend feeds. So you may not have it as an option for somebody who has been admitted. I hope that answers it. So it's not, the patient may not be available, may be unavailable inpatient, for an inpatient scenario, for someone on admission. For example, if your hospital doesn't have a diet kitchen, you may be doing the blending. You may not have that time. But if you had the commercial feeds, you just go and buy it, and then it's given by the nurses. Okay, so that's what I meant.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is, how relevant is training of other healthcare professionals of the multidisciplinary team in appreciating and cooperation with the RD during nutritional management?
100%, 100, let me even make it 300, no, 500% important. If not, you'll be in trouble. It's a team. If they don't understand what you are doing, you go and stand on a nurse to feed 3 hourly. She's giving medication. Why should she feed 3 hourly? She doesn't know your caloric calculation and all. So for me, training of the nurses and the doctors was paramount. I did so many training. Today, I'm just from a training for a postgraduate course they are doing in nursing for nurses that are working with plastic surgeons from different hospitals on nutrition in beds. If you don't train them, you'll be sabotaged. Not through any unintentionally, because they don't know what you are doing. Because you can't be doing the feeding yourself. You can sometimes, depending on the protocol at your hospital, you may not be the one passing the NG to. So if you, during ward rounds, you say this patient has 30% TBS even, I need an NG2 passed. You are not going to pass it yourself. You need one of the healthcare team members to pass it. The question is, why would they pass it if they don't know why they should pass it? So please, in your facility, morning meeting, when you can, get a team together, organize a training for them. It will help your work very, very, very much. It will help your work. Okay. So
Great.
it's very important. Thank you.
Please, may I piggyback off this question?
Okay.
Please forgive me if I'm cutting into the question part, but it's actually related.
Oh, that's RD Mavis. Oh, no problem at all. Please go ahead.
You just hit on a really key point, and I would like to find out a bit more. Now, last session, you talked about the roadblocks that you experienced. For example, when you gave the example of how you wanted to do some night feeding because the caloric requirement of the patient was behind. And the nurse blatantly told you, listen, my nurses will be sleeping, so they will not do the work. What you've talked about is how to break through those types of barriers. But have you experienced a situation where despite the teaching, despite the building teamwork, you encounter a situation where that particular head nurse or that particular nurse is refusing to assist in the care of that patient for you to make headway? And if you how do you go about it? Because in our line of work, we are constantly having to bow way, give way, because other disciplinaries are seen as maybe a bit more important than what we are doing. So you find yourself as a dietitian that you're having to step aside. And as a result, your patient's well-being is compromised. So I would just like to find out from your end, being a seasoned dietitian, how you go about when you hit that impasse where you're not getting the support you need, the patient's health and well-being is compromised. How do you navigate that? Because I think it would be good for young upcoming dietitians to know how to delicately and politically correct navigate this situation.
Thank you for this question. So let me start by giving the context of the scenario I gave last time. The patient became an ICU case and was moved to an ICU in another department. We then didn't have an ICU. So the nurses taking care of that patient were not any nurses trained by me. The nurses that were trained at the department would never have said that, because then they now understand the importance of having overnight feeding for the patients. Now, you have to own your space, including writing disclaimers, because what happens is that people want to interfere with your work But when things hit the roof and go bad, they are quick to say the dietitian. Nutrition belongs to the dietitian. I've learned that the hard way. So I stand my ground. The folders are there to write disclaimer. This pay case, I'm not involved in it because it got to a time the nurses had to call me and say that, because I will leave a notice on behind the patient on the wall. Night nurses, you are not feeding. Feed the patient. So they came to tell me that these things, it goes in the public. And I said, do your work. When I come, the patient has not been fed. I asked for the next on duty. Why? Oh, if I'm not satisfied, I escalate it. I go to the matron. After a while, everybody was doing their job. The reason is, if you don't put your foot down, everybody knows that if albumin is going low, your patient is edematous, is wasting. That's not the job of the nurse. That's not the job of the doctor. Everybody knows that it's your job. So if you allow the interference to now get to your work, it will be seen as if you are not doing your work. And that one, I promise myself, is not going to happen. So there's interference. So I had an issue. Let me give you a scenario where, without my consent, nurses were telling doctors when to take out an NG tube according to their discretion when they feel that the patient is stronger. I put my foot down and I issued a disclaimer on the ward to my team that you are not supposed to say when an NG tube comes out. I am supposed to do it because it is in my domain. That disclaimer is there up to date that a doctor who is new came, and when he was telling the nurses to take out the NGT, they said, no, we don't want an issue with the RDDD. She says, you have to see her. So the doctor told me later that he didn't want, the nurses told him that they didn't want an issue. Because if you let it slide, I am supposed to come and assess the patient and see if the patient is ready for oral, 100% oral feeding. So I know we are in a space where there are people who, and it's not just in Ghana. In India, my colleague is now friends with the surgeon. Before that happened, they clashed so many times that she was written up for heaven knows how long. But they are now good friends. But she stood her ground. You can do it in a respectful way. Don't fight with the team members, but stand your ground. If you see that the interference is too much, it means that the results they are getting from the patient has got nothing to do with you. You can't claim that. So what happened at the ICU when they decided not to do overnight feeding? And unfortunately for them, somebody went and overfed the patient, and the patient nearly aspirated. And then they came and then they said the dietitian had given a high volume of feed, and the nurses were quiet. Then I raised my hand during the ward run. I said, I have no stake in this matter. Your nurses have refused to follow the guidelines I've put there. Afterwards, I went to say, hey, your dietitian, it doesn't joke with me. Because then you are giving me results without my intervention. So let's be firm and fair. You know your work, you know your role. If you see someone trying to interfere, then the person should be able to take full responsibility of whatever goes wrong after that intervention. Okay. Howdy, Mavis, are you on? Am I on?
Yes.
I was talking to
Excellent.
myself.
No, not
Yes.
at
No,
all.
you were not.
Excellent.
Yes, okay,
No,
thank
we
you.
need that
Please
because
put your
sometimes it
foot
doesn't always
down.
go the way we want it, right? The person that
Yeah.
your team is going against you, and at the end of the day, it's going to come back to bite you. And how do
Yeah,
you deal
put
with
your
it?
foot
Well
down.
said. Exactly.
Put your foot down. Write disclaimers. Sometimes it's even the patient. I had a patient who had a caregiver. He was he was also another Chinese person. Every time I went there, the caregiver was interfering. Buy this. No, this is what we do. Do this. This is what we do. 1-page disclaimer. And then I went to concentrate on other patients. Then there was learn to give disclaimers. If the interference is affecting the quality of your work, it's not compulsory to be on that patient. Give a disclaimer. Then the discussion will be had. So are you the one? Because sometimes, to be fair to our team members, they have worked so long sometimes without a dietitian. People have been doing their own thing for long. And so you are new, it's the same old thing. So sometimes it takes a lot of patience, building rapport, but insisting for them to know what your role is in the team, so that nobody now comes to be, you are there and then people are telling your patient what to eat and all that. You stop it there and then. That's not your job. I'm here. Refer the patient to me. That's it. Okay. And I'm saying it passionately, but my team members will tell you I'm very patient with them. And because of that, we work together. Sometimes they don't know. So just avenues for training. But if you see the person knows and just feels like crossing his or her boundary, just put your foot down. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So let me just add some more questions. One, is there a need to assess swallowing integrity before feeding to minimize aspiration?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
one.
If you think your patient's swallowing is compromised, you can raise an alarm on it. But even with that, if you are doing an NG tube, you are bypassing the swallowing. So it should be more with a problem with the, what do you call it? The contents coming up. So is there an issue with the sphincter? Is there something? So you can. So it depends on what route you were. Is it oral? With oral, if you think that your patient maybe had a stroke after the incident, and you think that something has happened that may have compromised swallowing, you can do it. You can, to be safe. Yes, you can.
Great.
You can do it.
Thank you. All right. So Harriet wants to know if you can incorporate virgin coconut oil in the meals of the patient to help with the constipation, especially those on oral route of feeding.
Hello, Senam.
Yes.
Okay, you dropped or you had finished asking.
Sorry. Okay, so the person wants to know if you can include virgin coconut oil into the meals of patients to help with constipation.
Okay. So last week we learned that with the oil, you have to be careful because that can also give you issues. So your oil you are adding it's no more than a teaspoon or 2. I don't know whether that will, you see, sometimes you have to be careful. An intervention can work for one patient and not the other. So in as much as we can use virgin coconut oil, is it something that will work for a majority of your patients? If it would, okay. Now, is oil something we are being very careful about? Because we learned last 2 weeks that it's not easily metabolized. So in a patient with burns, you have to restrict the amount of oil. But if it works, and you can safely try it in the context of your patient. But Harriet, how much, what will be the recommendation of quantity before you can have softer stools? If you can answer that for me, then I'll see. How much do you have to give your patient?
Okay, so
before...
sometimes you are given 10 meals 3 times a day and it works.
That is a lot.
Yeah, from what you said, I just remembered that it will be a lot.
That is a lot. That's a lot. But you just have to be careful. You said 10 meals, how many
3 times
times? So it's like 2 teaspoons. 2 teaspoons per meal.
Something
3
like,
times.
Yeah, 3 times. Some people work with 2 times. Some people even work with 1. But then a lot of people work with the 3 times daily.
And it helps them well.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, because we work with surgical patients, and one of the side thing with surgical patients is constipation because of the medications they are on and they
okay,
are lying
okay,
down.
okay.
Yeah, and it worked.
Oh, that's a learning point for me as well. So it's a learning point for all of us. But so look at how you can safely try it and see. Because of course, keeping in mind that oil is restricted when you are dealing with a patient with a burn injury. So
Okay.
let's see. I think it's not a bad idea to give it a try and see. Okay. So it's
Okay, sure,
something we
thank
can
you.
now, yes, incorporate into an enteral feeding plan to see if it will help with the constipation. Okay, thank you so much for that. Thank
Okay.
you.
So I have a very loaded question here from RD Justice. I'll try to tease out the questions. Okay, so the first one is, what is the role of the speech and language therapy, the management of these individuals, and how do we adhere to their recommendations of the texture, and how do we go about it? That's one part of the question. So I'll let you answer, then I'll take another question from the long list of questions he sent out.
Oh, okay, so with the speech and language therapist, they are not going to come in unless you have a patient who has unique challenges with swallowing. Okay, so normally they come and do the assessment. If we are straightly going according to the rule, they will come and see. If you don't have, hi. We have a musical interlude by one of our associate members. Okay, so you see, the scenarios are many. And whenever you feel the need that where you are, you should involve another team member. Go for it. So the speech and language therapist, what did they do? It's mainly got to do with swallowing in your role where they can come in and meet you. So if you have a patient who is having difficulty like that because of an issue, I actually had a patient like that, but it was more of psychological. Okay, there wasn't an obstruction. And all this was because we kept giving things that the patient, if this was difficult, the patient shouldn't be able to have taken this, but the patient was taking this. So then we found out that was psychological. You had to bring the patient out and then the swallowing improved. So a lot of things happen, but feel free to go and call any help team member if you think you need that intervention. So that is where they will come in. I think there was a second question from the same person.
Yes. So the other question is, with the management of the vomiting, can we request that the doctor optimize or give antiemetics?
But that is done when the first line of defense has failed.
Okay.
So in plastics and burns care, they say you escalate things. It's like a ladder. There's what you start with, and then you go. So by the time you are giving that intervention, then the woman, we have patients on that, but that's not the first line of defense. They normally look for whatever is happening before. But we have had patients with uncontrolled vomiting, and they had to do that. So it's possible. But that will not be your first line of defense. You try, yes, action. You try other things first.
All right. Okay, and I think the last part of his question is, with the management of refeeding, do you think it's appropriate to request that the doctor prescribe the patients with vitamin C and multivitamin supplements?
You can. You can assume that all but last week I told you that it's part of the core management because of the high requirements of the nutrients, micronutrients. Your patient, even if it was doing well with the ordinary amount of vitamin C and all, the requirements have gone high. So whatever it is, you need to supplement. So yes, they do it. So if you're in a facility where your doctor is not updated on that, you can have a discussion, because when it comes to supplements, you have a huge say in it. So you can talk to the patient, the doctor, or the healthcare team about it. These discussions should be had. You know, we are professionals. There's a lot to offer. Let's not stay in our corner. Sometimes they appreciate the discussion because they never thought of it. Okay, implication of this and this. You go, oh, I want to have a discussion with you. I think that our patient with burns, this is what we can offer, so that especially if I flag the person has been at risk of malnutrition. So it can be done. You can have that discussion with the team member.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. I think we have just about 4 more questions in the chat. Okay,
Okay.
so if you get a patient with CKD stage 5, who is also a burns patient, how do we go about it since the protein requirements for burns patients are increased?
Oh, okay. So maybe I think the person missed the first presentation, or maybe it didn't come early. So I mentioned, I think someone asked the same question last 2 weeks, yes. And I said that it won't be 0.8 grams per kg per day, or it won't be lower than that, or 0.5 or whatever, depending on the patient. But you still will not have as much protein as if the person didn't have a renal issue. So it's up to you to make the call and see, based on labs, how things are going and all that, medical interventions that they've given to the patient and all that. Then you adjust your protein accordingly. So I was even saying that even if you do 1 gram, you are erring on the side of caution. So I explained that with renal, it won't be as high as your normal protein requirements. So I hope I've answered it, or that needs further explanation.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The next, how do you go about a diabetic with burns without increasing glucose levels?
So it's all so you see, you overdo your carbohydrates all in relation to the person's activity and requirements. So you know that even with diabetics, they are not the same. I've had a diabetic who was a fisherman, muscles well built, and you can't give this person 1,008 calories, this thing. You're going to high C's. Okay, same diabetic. So in the same way, your requirements have gone high for your patients. So as per your assessment of the patient, it will still be more than if the person didn't have needs. And the person will utilize the carbohydrates, because the requirements have gone high. If you still follow what you would have given the person if the person wasn't burnt, in terms of your carbohydrate restrictions and then your caloric restrictions and all that, you get your patient going into hypo because the requirements have increased. So you have to factor it. So what we do is we add a bit extra to what you would have given the person if the person didn't have a burns injury. And they have very good sugar control, very, very good sugar control. So that's the way you can go about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Please, if you're not satisfied with the answer, you could always come back. Maybe I didn't explain it well. Okay.
In case the socioeconomic status of the patient makes it difficult to afford the treatment with enteral feeding support, what do you recommend, especially when it's urgent?
Oh, unless you decide to go and buy it for the patient, you can only use what you have available. Sometimes that's the unfortunate scenario you find yourself in. You know very well. So I've ended up buying whey protein with my own money for patient because I said I can't lose this patient. But the other option will be to just make do with what you have. It's unfortunate. Even with medication, even with dressing items, the doctors may want, sometimes they get very bad infection you want the strong antibiotics the patient can't afford. The doctors can also use their pocket money all the time. So they'll give the antibiotic that, you know, the patient can afford. And everybody knows that it may not be effective as if you had gotten this one. But the main thing is, as I said, if the ideal is not available, what is available is ideal. So sometimes you be in the dilemma. You need whey protein, you need this. And then the patient can afford eggs. So go and buy the eggs and use it. So that's a challenge you face most of the time.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So Cynthia wants to know what's the maximum number of eggs a Ben's patient can take in a day.
Are you ready? I've given 10 before. I gave and then my pharmacist came and asked if I wanted to finish the patient. I mean, we became friends afterwards. He's a very good friend of mine. He just couldn't fathom it. 7 grams protein in egg, right? So if your patient, so what my patient was doing, he said he couldn't have it orally. So the mother would bring salad and then we cut it in for the patient to take. And maybe after the presentation, there has been an old research where they actually used a lot of eggs for Ben's patients. And then they try to see how high their cholesterol will go. I wish I could pull out that research. It was a very interesting research. It didn't, because the cholesterol requirements went so high, it didn't move it. But I sometimes play it safe and I just give the egg whites. So depending on what is happening to your patient, feel free, if only your patient will eat it. After all, it's pure pure protein that you are given, especially sans the. So without the egg yolk, if you were given 10 a day, it comes down to about 40 gram protein. And that is big, that is huge. So if your patient required 80 grams or 100, you've already done 40. Then you can get the 60 grams from other places. So please feel free to use the eggs. As for the maxibot, I've 10. Other places more than that. And the patient did very well, including good cholesterol level. So it's interesting, yes. You are using it as an intervention. So it's a protein, you are using it to satisfy a protein calculation. So it will be more.
Okay. All right. Next question, I think this is the final question. How should professionals integrate nutrition care at all levels aside training the other team members?
Okay, so 1, be on top of your game. Everybody wants a winner. There have been make or break cases that everybody had, once you are successful with those cases, your work speaks for you. Okay. So with Ben's care, your output is important because as they say, if things are not going well, your patient will expose you. As they say, something will expose you, your patient will expose you. Every day you go to the ward, everybody will see your patient deteriorating. You get it. So be on top of your game. Set an example to why nutrition is important in your facility so that everybody knows that without this intervention, I think I have many proud moments, but when there was a boy who had been given up on in Cape Coast. He had the flesh-eating bacteria and then the whole back was gone. And Cape Coast was actually just waiting for him to just pass. And the mother was, oh, why don't you do something? So they were forced to refer to Kolibu. So during the ward rounds, the consultant asked one of the residents that he was skin and bones, almost at death's door. Why have you brought this patient to us? It was code for you are coming to give us trouble because he will pop. And without missing a beat, the resident said, because Dede is here. Because I've handled a similar difficult case and he was proud to say, and when he said that, nobody said anything. This guy not only became okay, maybe later, if you're interested, I could send you his pictures. And he can come online and talk about his before and all. He's fine. Okay, so there's a lot you can do. Aside the training, just be a good example of what your work is so that it speaks for itself and then you help your patients. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you very much, Rowdy Dede. I think a member's hand has been up since I started reading the questions. I think he can now unmute and speak. Yes, Yannick, or the eunuch, Yaudogbe. Kindly go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Yes.
Good evening.
So we've had in this discussion considerations for route of feed administration, and I'm just curious to know which ones you used, because case one, I remember I was a PEG tube, but the other cases, especially if the lips and the nostrils are compromised, which options would have been more ideal?
Good.
Your approach, which you used.
Yes. So here's another challenge. These PEG tubes, NG tubes, and all that are not free at cost to the patient. So sometimes your patient will need a specific route of intervention and then nothing. They can't go and put a PEG. They can't do anything. So for the acid case, it's actually a live case now. No, the patient needs a PEG tube. She can't afford. She can't even afford other treatments and all that. So you are forced to force her to open her mouth and eat, knowing very well that it's not going to be 100% effective. So sometimes your expertise, because you are in a unless you are going to buy the PEG tube for the patient to put there, and even that you need the consent of the patient to sign the consent form that I'll do a PEG tube. So you meet patients who need to have a PEG tube. The patient says, no, I'm not going to have something piercing my stomach. And guess what? You have to feed orally with a disclaimer. I think this is the best route for the patient. But patient has refused to have the PEG option. So we are doing oral feeding. That's all. And then you try to just encourage. So for this patient, she rarely can eat, open her mouth and eat and all that. But it's the oral route because practically she can't afford the PEG tube to be passed. Did I answer Yonik?
Yes, that's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Dear members, do we have any more questions? We've gone past our usual 2 hours and we've had a very engaging and educative presentation today. So if you have any more questions, kindly let us know. If not, I'll call someone to pray with us and we'll bring today's presentation to a close. Okay, someone is asking if we can get the slides for the first presentation and then this. Okay, so yes, I guess we can, RDDD can send that to us and we'll make it available for everyone on the Gantt pages. And please, the attendance form has been posted in the chat. So if you haven't filled it out yet, kindly do so. All right. So RDDD, we are very grateful for taking us through the management of burns using nutrition for these past few weeks, last 2 weeks, and then for today. We've learned a lot, and I know that once we encounter such cases, we would cast our minds back to what you've taught us and also apply, and we would reach out to you if we face any difficulties. So on that note, I would say thank you all for joining, and we thank God for giving us today and letting us have such a brilliant presentation. We pray that everything goes on well for each and every one of us, and we would have a restful evening. So have a good evening, and thanks for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your evening. Bye.
Bye.